Hunting for Easter eggs means that your work is never finished. There's always another secret out there, or more justifications for a developer putting something strange for the player to find in their video game, but I always like the extra layer of mystery to them, because we often know what an Easter egg is doing and why it is there, but sometimes we don't. And it definitely doesn't play on my mind to the point where I feel like I need to make a video about it. If you give someone free rein to do what they want with a game, then frankly you shouldn't be too surprised if what you get at the end is a big old bundle of crazy. Most games are designed with briefs and strict guidelines, and so the creative freedom usually leaks out in the form of some wild, completely irrelevant Easter eggs that are designed to encourage the player to explore more than just the straightforward path to the finish. It's the truly irrelevant secrets that I can't stop thinking about though, because whereas a cheeky reference to something else is easy to understand, an Easter egg that deliberately doesn't make sense is a whole different ballgame and can often be a discovery that plays on your mind for way longer than is reasonable. It gets you wondering why exactly a developer would decide to put this in a game and how I should feel upon finding it. Am I supposed to feel privileged to witness the unrestrained madness of a developer firing on all cylinders? Honestly, I just feel confused and I need to put those thoughts into a video. Speculation can only get you so far if you don't write some of it down and share it with your audience. Maybe one of you people watching will instantly understand any of these Easter eggs. Frankly, I just want some distance. Now seems like a good a time as any to talk about Pokemon's obsession with ghosts. Now, I'm not talking about all the ghost-type Pokemon, although I will say that the more you think about it, the creepier it is that there's an entire classification of Pokemon that are spiritual and based on the concept of death and an afterlife. That kind of ties into the wider thought that Pokemon uses death and ghosts a little more than you'd expect, with numerous cemeteries dedicated to housing deceased Pokemon, and more than a few NPCs seen actively mourning their dead friend. I get that Japan is a very spiritual culture, and some of that would always naturally bleed into a Japanese game for kids, but at least everything I've talked about so far is explainable. Then Gen 6 rolled around and Game Freak were all like, nah, we're just gonna be scary for no reason now. I was just thinking that Pokemon needed a few more human ghosts. Why can't I use them in battle? Ever since Gen 6 and Pokemon X and Y, Pokemon has gone all in on having human ghosts not so well hidden in the background or tucked around a corner behind an optional side quest. Sun and Moon had its weird trainer school detour, and Sword and Shield was more sad than inexplicably creepy, but Gen 6 was so on form with hitting that sweet spot of not making any sense and scaring the bejesus out of me. X and Y threw you into the deep end with a Hex Maniac trainer who slides without a walking cycle out from behind you and across the room, before deciding that you're not worth haunting or whatever and disappearing. Yeah! No idea. There's a few theories floating around and maybe some extra info at Lumios's train station, but nothing concrete is ever alluded to in game, and so this optional encounter is just 30 seconds of being confused over why Game Freak be like this. Clearly wasn't enough, because over in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire Town, upon reaching Phoebe, you probably didn't notice this small chair in the background that gains a ghost girl in one of the last frames as that shot fades to black. You're then shown her perspective as she climbs out of the chair to walk towards you, and I think she's hiding behind your character in this shot, but you probably didn't notice any of this because of how subtle this secret is. Just as well, because there's not even a whisper of a hint as to who this is and why she's screwing with the player like this. And to think we went at least the first 3 generations without so much as a passing reference to human death. Subtlety is for the weak. I'd love to know why Game Freak feel the need to do this so reliably, because it calls into question the entire mythos of ghost Pokemon, who of course aren't dead because they were never truly living, but that kind of changes when you acknowledge dead humans, because now Pokemon can die, but of course they don't become ghost Pokemon. Which is a little confusing, because if you're new to this franchise and you work all this out, you know, it's going to be a little bit daunting to think about. I miss when Call of Duty had the power to genuinely surprise. I guess Warzone was a welcome addition to the mix last year that I didn't really think would be as good as it is, but these days it seems like Call of Duty is only ever capable of meeting expectations rather than surpassing them every now and then. That's likely a product of the times now that COD has become a homogenized, sterilized version of its glory days, but I can't help but wish for another game like we had in the mid to late 2000s, like the aptly named Call of Duty Finest Hour. which isn't the greatest COD game, but it might be the best place to go for weird unexplained Easter eggs hidden away behind an unmarked wall that can be blown up with 2 grenades. Hey, I understand that war is a bizarre, unexplainable time where strange things happen on the regular, but I'm gonna need someone a lot more qualified than I am to explain why there's a room in this game full of just the most random of things. Could use some of that creativity nowadays. I mean, where do you want me to start with all of this? The ghost room from Call of Duty Finest Hour was never likely to get a full explanation, but a large part of me would love to see one of the developers attempt to explain everything that ended up in this room. I've seen it many times, but I feel like I notice something new every time, like how there's all these black and white portraits of kids and a giant rat caged under the stairs. How about the tiny plane flying between the floating candles, or the mini tank roaming around the place, or the actually adult man-sized baby who just gets up and leaves because he's seen enough and clearly has better things to do with his day. There's a lot going on, and I think the intention was for it to be unexplainable, but I still find it odd that this bizarre little side room can be found in a Call of Duty game, complete with an explosive Kaiser bear that you can pick up as an explosive item and chuck all over the place. I don't know, feels like something from a bygone era that could never be replicated. War has indeed changed. France sure is a country that exists. It's got a lot of history of chopping off heads and massive societal upheaval, and it surprises me that more video games don't take this as a bit of inspiration to set their video game in. You could have a lot of fun with that because the entire world, the entire structure of a lot of people's lives got turned upside down in a pretty short period of time. And if you really wanted to, you could get really creative with that. Or, how about some cookie-cutter Assassin's Creed with Unity out here feeling like the least inspiring take on the French Revolution imaginable? These games kept doing this for the longest time, basically taking a time period and using it as a backdrop for some crappy storytelling involving Templars and usually some kind of real-world shit that no one cares about, when what I really want them to do is fully embrace the manic lunacy of late 18th century France, when heads were rolling and everything was on fire. Assassin's Creed Unity feels like a missed opportunity to lean into the craziest side of history and have all these weird and wonderful characters running around, instead of the sterile version of France we got. I know the unintentional glitches added character, but it just wasn't enough. I remember finding that one guy in that boat with the dead bodies and so many cats, and I want more of that. Sometimes you find an Easter egg that you know has no explanation or real-life reference, and you accept that, but it's still fun to think about what this little secret means within the grander scope of Assassin's Creed Unity. You can sweep it under the rug as a throwaway detail to flesh out the world and reward adventurous players with an odd scene that has no use or meaning, but I can't deny that the setup gives you just enough to play with for some pretty wild speculation. Why are there so many cats in this boat? Why are there dead bodies in here covered with bloody rags? Why is the man acting so strangely and spouting so much garbled, excited French? We'll never know the answers to any of these because I doubt that Ubisoft ever intended for this to have any kind of a detailed backstory, but the fact that so much of this game does have explanations behind it leaves me wanting more. I want to know the crazy Catman's story, and whether or not he killed the people for his cats or with his cats, or if he leads a crazy cult of murderous cats that will one day take over the streets of Paris. More seriously, this is what I wanted to see more of in Assassin's Creed Unity. Less watered down AAA blandness and more French Revolution madness. Eat the rich and feed them to your cats. The most inexplicable problems are often the hardest to accept, and I may be one of the few who cares about some off-the-beaten-path secret in Jet Set Radio Future, but damn it, it's worth talking about! I do wonder if we blow discoveries way out of proportion and fabricate some ridiculous backstory that this weird thing is clearly alluding to, but I still think it's strange that Jet Set Radio Future hides something unique in a corner of a level that requires you to speedrun the hell out of it to see it. Not just do quite well in a late game level, you need to beat Kibogoaka Hill inside 2 minutes, which is pretty goddamn hard if you don't have a speedrunner's level of practice poured into it. But should you do this, you'll be able to visit this little side area and watch this clock open up, do a little dance, and then close up, never to reopen. Alright, so it's like an idle animation, yeah? Wouldn't that be a piece of cake? I love how certain fan bases obsess over tiny details that to outsiders probably doesn't matter at all because it kinda doesn't, but Jet Set Radio Future came out in 2002, and virtually ever since then, there's been this doomsday clock, and no one's really worked out what it means or what it does, or even if it should do anything, and frankly, 2002 is nearly 2 decades ago, in case you lost track of time. That is enough time to drive a man crazy. It's probably nothing, but the specificity of the details behind the Doomsday Clock are too strange to ignore. It's entirely possible that the developers set this animation to play at a set interval that they didn't care too much about and never gave it a second thought, but the fact that this process is visible without the need for glitches, but under a time constraint so tight that it's clearly meant as a reward for the highest top percent of top players, is very suspicious. The animation itself is so unique and clearly custom made to the extent that it isn't recycled anywhere else that you really have to question why effort was put into something that so few players would see. It's so puzzling that I honestly wouldn't be surprised if we end up with some kind of article on Kotaku in a few years about how players have finally cracked one of those Easter eggs that took years to find that I've heard so much about. Maybe it was meant to hint at a new Jet Set Radio game and they gave up implementing it further when the devs realized that that wasn't gonna happen. Clearly it's a doomsday clock, but just not that doomsday. Ain't it funny how technology has moved forward with such a relentless pace that handhelds are virtually unrecognizable from how they used to look? The gap between the Switch and the Game Boy is night and day, and whereas the Switch has built-in connections to social networks so you can share this weird twitchy dragon with whoever gives a damn on Twitter with a few button presses, the Game Boy had to do with this clunky camera add-on that is mostly there so you can print off low-res versions of your own face to show your friends. What the Switch doesn't have though is some error messages featuring terrifying faces and some inviting phrases like "Who are you running from?" Maybe Nintendo will add something like this before folders and menu music. It's been a while since I last talked about these fucking horrifying faces, but I still can't quite get over just how completely out of place they are. I can kinda see where Nintendo were coming from, since the Game Boy camera has this interface that is at least somewhat similar to classic RPGs, hence the run feature. But of course you don't need to run from a camera, that'd be silly.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
So I suppose the idea is to have some kind of pushback onto the player that ties into the idea that the camera is somewhat more reflective of real life than a standard video game, but what is this? There are 6 faces in total, all scribbled on and annotated to appear distorted enough to be scary, I guess, but the one with the finger over its lips is the absolute worst thing. It looks almost playful, like it knows it's talking to a child, and that's really, really creepy. I never had a Game Boy camera growing up, but could you imagine seeing something like this when you're just exploring some of the features of this quirky bit of new technology? I hope Nintendo realised what they did by putting these faces in such an innocuous location. This is a jump scare on par with all those screamer videos from early YouTube and may well have helped to influence those young minds. There's no explanation, and frankly, I don't even want one. I just want my innocence back. This is RabbidLuigi, and I would love to know how much controversy Nintendo would generate if they tried something like this nowadays. You know, new Pokemon Snap is coming out soon, that kind of works. Imagine if there's a run feature in that game, and you press run, and rather than escaping, it's some weird distorted version of Pikachu's face saying something like, "You can't escape." Why would they feel the need to do that? Do you think they'd get away with that now? Did they think they'd get away with it like 20 years ago? It's only like 2 decades old, the Game Boy camera. Was the world so much crazier back then? Hi, just want to give a quick shout out to some of my top supporters on Patreon. We have Ramon Alberto, Jerome Kiryu, Fusion Warrior, Sarah Malion, Christopher Robinson, Joe Creamer, and Scott Riker. Thank you all for supporting what I do on YouTube, and if you want to join them, you can go to patreon.com/RabbidLuigi, where I post updates and behind the scenes stuff, and we generally have a really good time. Also, what topic would you like to see me cover next? Leave your suggestion in a comment on this video, because I'll be taking the best ideas and making a poll on my community tab, which you can then vote on to decide what the next video is about. I'll be announcing the winner of the poll over on my Twitter, so make sure you follow me so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.